So it's been about a year since I made my last Q&A video. I asked you guys to submit some questions and I would answer them in a video. I figured this would be the perfect opportunity since it has been about a year and we just moved into the new office space. I'm trying to switch it up and do some things differently, so I hope you guys like it. I'm going to be reading some questions off of my phone that I screenshotted and saved for this video. I'm not answering every single question that people asked, mainly because I got a lot of questions and it would be a very, very long video. So I decided to narrow it down to about 10 or 15 questions. The first question is, how do you keep your photos looking soft without making them look unnatural? Even high contrast from harsh sun looks great in filmic in your photos. This has been something I've been working on for a long time, and honestly, I don't feel like I really even got that good at it until recently. What it really came down to was the editing and playing with the tone curve. One thing I've started doing recently that I find that looks very good is lifting the shadows in your photos, but lowering the blacks. Like I said, I struggled with this for a long time because editing photos shot midday has always been one of my weak points, so I've always tried to stay away from it. But especially on my Route 66 trip, I did not have that convenience or that luxury of being able to go to every location at sunset. So especially for my Route 66 photos, which I believe those might be what you're talking about, I even mentioned it in one of my Route 66 videos. It feels like the midday harsh light actually looked even better than sunset did, which I was actually really shocked about, but ended up being really happy about. The main reason being, I think, is everything's a lot lighter out there. You don't really have a ton of green, so you don't have trees creating harsh shadows, and it seems like a lot of the pavement, whether it's the road and everything else, just seems to be. So I think that allowed a lot of the light to just bounce and fill in a lot of those harsh shadows, because I even got a couple comments saying they also prefer shooting midday light when it comes to out west. But otherwise, if you're in an environment, say, where it's a lot more green, the shadows are going to be a lot more harsh. And I think it really comes down to the editing. I've been thinking about making a video talking about editing and shooting in harsh light, so let me know if you guys would like to see something like that. The second question is kind of a longer one. I chose the A7C because I was already an A6000 user when I needed to upgrade. Admittedly, however, given the chance and money, I would have loved a Leica Q2 or Q3. In your videos, you've shot with the A7C with the one lens. Was that a response to the Leica Q system or a financial decision like it was for me? That's a really good question, because obviously you guys know, if you've seen my previous videos, I love the A7C with my 35mm 1.8. I've always gravitated toward the 35mm focal length as far back as 2017. My very first lens was a 24-70, but I wanted something with a lower aperture that I could shoot, portraits or in low light with a little bit easier, and I decided to go with the 35mm. I almost went with a 24, but 35 is just kind of what I went with, and I stuck with it for pretty much everything. And even now, it is pretty much all of that I use, even though I do have a 24mm, a 50mm, and a 20mm. I also have a 28-70 that I use, but generally I do stick with the 35. So it's not really a financial decision because I do have all of those lenses. But the one thing I do love about the Leica Q system, and I didn't even know about the Leica Q, I don't think the Q2 was out at the time, back in like 2017, or even if the original Leica Q was. I just love the simplicity of having one camera and one lens, because even Sony has the RX1R, which is basically just a Sony a7R II with a Zeiss 35 f2 lens on it, which makes it very similar to something along the lines of a Leica, although that has a 28mm lens. I guess the better comparison would probably be the Fuji X100 series cameras. So it's not really a financial decision, it just really comes down to shooting what I enjoy shooting. Every once in a while I'll get a comment where they ask me why I shoot Sony when the type of photos I shoot looks like someone who would shoot on Leica or Fuji, but Sony's just what I like, it's what I've always shot with pretty much, so that's what I stick with. I love this next question. They asked, if you were to buy your first camera as a beginner, which camera would you pick? Then saying they're not planning straight away to be a professional photographer, they just want to learn a new skill and have a passion for photography and videography, also love to travel. If you're just starting out, you probably don't have a ton of money to invest in it, and I would not recommend investing a ton of money into something that you might do for a little bit, then maybe you will fall off and not do it as much anymore. So my first camera was the Sony a6000, and it was perfect for what it was. I wasn't really interested in shooting video at the time. I just wanted to take photos of me and my friends. But I don't know if I would recommend the A6000 now, since it is like a 10-year-old camera, although it is capable of doing anything you want photo-wise, even though it is a little outdated. Video-wise, it does leave a little bit to be desired, so maybe I would look at the A6400 or A6500. I can't really speak for other camera brands since I haven't really shot those before, but the Canon R8 also looks like a great camera if you're interested in something like that. But then you start moving into the little bit more expensive territory. And when you're shooting with the newer Canon RF cameras, the lenses get very expensive very quickly. So while I am a little biased, I would recommend Sony because they have so many lens options that are actually affordable. But if you don't mind shelling out a little extra money, then I would strongly consider the new A6700. It takes incredible photos and the video is amazing for what it is too. I think the camera is $1,400 US, which is honestly an incredible still because you get a 26 megapixel sensor, so you know the photos are gonna look amazing, tons of lens options, and you can shoot 10-bit video in 4K up to like 4K 60, maybe 4K 120, I'm not exactly sure. But if you have enough money to spend on the A6700, I would highly recommend that camera because it will last you a long time before it's ever considered obsolete. The next question is it worth to upgrade to the A7C, or is it worth it to just put some cash toward the A7 IV, which is about a $700 difference? I think it really kind of depends on what you're upgrading from, honestly. He did not say what he's upgrading from, although I do love the A7C and obviously I am a little bit biased toward it. If you just want one camera that's great for everything, the A7 IV might be the way to go. But if you don't care about 10-bit video or shooting as much video, I think the A7C is perfect. Although it is also worth considering waiting for the A7C II when it comes out because it will have the exact same specs as the A7 IV, and possibly more actually, since it will have the AI autofocus, which the A7 IV does not have, and hopefully it should be a cheaper price compared to the A7 IV. We don't know how much cheaper it will be compared to the A7 IV, but if I had to guess, it would probably be maybe $2,300, $2,200, somewhere in that range. So I hope that answered your question, kind of. I do have a video comparing the A7C and the A7 IV, so you could go watch that. I posted that about a year ago. So you could check that out and see what you think and make your decision from there. Obviously, since this channel is pretty heavily focused on the A7C, I'm getting a lot of A7C questions. So the next one is, what Sony would you recommend if you can only have one? Then the second part of this question is A7C or A7 IV if you can only choose one. I feel like I've talked about this a lot in previous videos, but the A7C is my favorite camera, so I would choose this over any camera. Not because of specs, because technically the specs aren't the best and it's running on 5-year-old hardware at this point. But the A7C is what inspires me to actually go out and shoot the most compared to the A7 IV, which I don't really enjoy shooting with very much. So I would have to say the A7C. The next question is, how do you overcome creative block and how do you motivate yourself to go out and take photos? I see a lot of photographers say online, even when you don't have the motivation or the creative energy to go out and take photos, you should just go out anyways, just take photos, exercise your creativity. And I agree with that to an extent, but at the same time, I think it's also a good idea to take breaks as well, whether it's a week or two or even longer. I made a video this past January talking about how I usually like to take the month of January off to just kind of contemplate and figure out where I want to take my photography in the next year. And there's a couple other things I do. You know, I watch a lot of YouTube videos as well. I watch a lot of videos about photography. I love watching videos, kind of like my photo walk videos, where people actually go out and take photos. Watching that kind of video is going to inspire you a lot more than just watching a normal gear review video on YouTube. I also highly recommend picking up some photo books as well. This is from Becky and Chris. It's called Mozzie. It's one of my favorites that I've read recently. So yeah, YouTube videos and photo books. If I'm not out taking photos, I like to study photography. What's your opinion about the Viltrox lenses? I think Viltrox has actually been killing it recently. They've released 2 new lenses that I have been dreaming of and begging for Sony to make for the past couple years. Not just the 16mm 1.8, I also saw that they released a 28mm 1.8. I don't know how I missed that, but I would love to pick that up. The only downside to the Viltrox lenses is they're a little bit bigger than I would want them to be, and they aren't as sharp wide open, which isn't the biggest deal to me. I can work around that. I can make that work, but the Viltrox 16mm 1.8 and the 28mm 1.8, I would love to pick up both of those lenses. So yeah, I would love to get my hands on those lenses, so Viltrox, if you're watching, send them to me. The next question is, will you be making a video on York for street photography? I assume he means New York. It's my favorite place to shoot. New York is one of my favorite places to shoot too. Some of my favorite photos I've ever shot have been from New York. And I used to have a friend that lived in Brooklyn, and I was able to go stay with him. He doesn't live there anymore, so if I were to go back to New York, it's going to be a little bit more expensive, but hopefully soon. Hopefully soon. That's all I can say. Do you feel it's become harder for photographers to shine on Instagram? Because yes, I think it really has, especially with Reels and photos not being as promoted as they were before. I remember being able to post a banger photo and then it would get picked up by all of these other Instagram pages promoting it. My post would get like 2,000 likes compared to the average like 300-400 now. Because now Instagram promotes Reels and you have to make Reels if you want to grow on your Instagram. I think I stagnated probably about 4,500 followers on Instagram for like a year or two until I started making YouTube videos. And it wasn't until then that my Instagram actually started growing again. So even then, it's not like my growth on Instagram is because of the algorithm, so it's not like my posts even perform as well as they used to. It can be quite disheartening, but you just have to remember that you're a photographer, not a content creator. Which I feel that Instagram has really deceived a lot of especially newer photographers into thinking they have to make Reels and they have to be a content creator. I don't think you need to be. That's also why I kind of quit focusing on Instagram as much as I used to. I post on Instagram every once in a while now, but I'm not too worried about it. I feel that YouTube has really been that place to shine for my work because I've been making YouTube videos way longer than I've even been a photographer. So I feel like I've just found that perfect middle ground. I found that perfect balance here with my channel. The next question is, what's the #1 place you want to do street photography? New York is one of my favorite places to do street photography because the city is so big and you can walk around for hours and always constantly be finding new places to shoot. But somewhere I've never shot before that I would love to do street photography is probably either Tokyo or London. So hopefully one day I'll be able to go to those places and bring you guys along with me and make some videos about shooting street photography in those places. And the next question is, have you ever been to Austria/Europe? No, I've never traveled overseas. I've never been outside of the United States before. I would especially love to go to Italy and Norway to take photos, and when I do, you guys will be the first to know. And the final question we're going to answer today is, if you had to start your career over, how would you redo it? This is my favorite question because at this point in my career, it's taken some weird turns and it's kind of split off into two different paths. Because on one side you have the YouTube side, and on the other side you have my commercial photography and video production work that I do. On the YouTube side, I wish I would have started making videos a lot sooner, probably back in 2017 or 2018 I would have started instead of waiting until 2021, which I did now. Because a lot of you guys don't know, even actually this channel that you're watching now, I've been making videos on this channel for probably about the past 15 years. Way longer than I've been interested in photography. Those videos will never ever see the light of day ever again. But I wish I would have been making photography videos as far as back then because I think it would have been great to document the learning process for me and my photography instead of waiting until that point in 2021 where I felt like I was confident enough in my photography and my skills and my knowledge that I could actually provide and help you guys. I think documenting the journey of getting to where I am now would have been just as enjoyable. And on the other side, I started out doing portrait and fashion photography, which I don't really even do anymore, which I don't regret doing that. I still love so many of those photos and they will stay in my portfolio forever. But looking back, I feel like I should have started reaching out and trying to work with brands and agencies more. I wish I would have reached out to more modeling agencies and worked directly with them. Maybe that would have allowed me to have an actual career in portrait and fashion photography. I got a couple opportunities, some fell through, some happened, some didn't. But it's all a learning process. And looking back now, I wish I would have started getting into video work a lot more because a lot of my paid work now, it's mainly video. It's not even that much photo anymore. Back then, I would have had no idea where to start with shooting video. Now, with years under my belt of experience, I know that the key is reaching out to production companies and businesses, and that is really where a lot of opportunities and paid work comes from. So I think that kind of answers the question. If not, I really wish I would have just started reaching out directly to people, because connections are the most important thing. And I really wish I would have started building connections a lot sooner, especially with production companies and reaching out directly to businesses and offering to do work for them. So I hope there was some information in this video that you could take away and learn from. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, my last Q&A was about a year ago, so maybe we can make this a little bit more of a regular thing. Maybe I could do it twice a year. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to help support me so I can continue growing and reaching a larger audience. And I hope I could inspire you guys to get out and take more photos as well. Go out and shoot.